All right, so let's dive into this situation that's been unfolding in Encinitas, California, where we have this newly elected city council that's kind of finding out that governing is well, it's a lot different than campaigning. You imagine like running on a platform of stopping overdevelopment, and then you get elected and you have this huge amount of support, and then boom, you're hit with this legal landmine called builder's remedy. And we've got these two articles here that I think paint this really fascinating picture. These articles give us like a front row seat to this this tension that's brewing between state housing mandates and local control, a scenario that's playing out in communities all across California, really. It's like a real life case study of campaign promises colliding with the realities of governance.
So builder's remedy is essentially a state law that acts as a sort of safety valve for housing development. Basically, if a city isn't meeting its state mandated housing goals and then they reject a qualifying project, developers can use this builder's remedy to kind of bypass local zoning laws. It's a really powerful tool that can force cities to approve projects they might otherwise resist, even if those projects don't really align with the community's vision.
So in Encinitas, we have this newly elected council, and they campaigned on this platform of fighting overdevelopment. But now they're facing this builder's remedy dilemma. And the articles really highlight just how inexperienced they are in navigating this whole situation.
Yeah, and I think the quote from Mayor Ehlers in one of the articles really sums it up. He said, "I think you guys don't know what you're dealing with, and that worries me." So it seems like there's this pretty steep learning curve when it comes to understanding like the intricacies of housing policy and, the legal ramifications of their decisions.
They campaigned on a platform of stopping overdevelopment, but are now faced with the legal realities of their position. We also saw some concerning behavior from council members, including inflammatory rhetoric and attempts to shift blame rather than find solutions.
Right. And all of this raises some important questions, like what are the implications of inexperienced leadership at the local level? How should communities balance the need for housing with concerns about overdevelopment? And how do we navigate the often thorny relationship between state mandates and local control?
Those are some big questions, and it seems like there are no easy answers.
That's right. But by engaging with these questions, by understanding the complexities of these issues, we can start to have more productive conversations and find solutions that work for everyone.
Yeah, it's like we're constantly being bombarded with information from all sides.
It's a concerning example of how quickly rhetoric can escalate, especially when you're dealing with these really emotionally charged issues like development.
Yeah, definitely. And the article mentions that Councilmember O'Hara also initially voted against the development, seemingly willing to risk triggering builder's remedy, and then spent a considerable amount of time criticizing the previous council.
Right, and it really highlights the disconnect that can sometimes exist between campaign promises and the practical realities of governing. It's one thing to campaign on stopping overdevelopment, but it's another thing entirely to grapple with the legal framework and the potential consequences of your actions once you're actually in office.
Yeah, it sounds like they were really caught between a rock and a hard place, wanting to stay true to those campaign promises, but also trying to avoid the potential chaos that builder's remedy could unleash. What about Councilmember San Antonio? The articles mentioned that he seemed a bit out of his depth on these issues as well.
Yeah, San Antonio openly admitted to just a lack of knowledge about housing issues, which raises questions about his preparedness for the role, especially given the urgency and complexity of California's housing crisis.
I'm curious to hear more about what happened to the council meeting and how this whole builder's remedy threat played out.
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Because despite their initial resistance and strong words, the council ultimately voted to approve the Quail Meadows project.
So they essentially caved to the pressure of builder's remedy. That must have been a tough pill to swallow after campaigning so hard against overdevelopment.
Yeah, it seems that way. It's a classic example of the difficult decisions that elected officials often have to make. They have to balance their own beliefs and campaign promises with the legal and practical realities of their position. And in this case, it seems like the potential consequences of triggering builder's remedy outweighed their desire to take a hard line against development.
It really underscores the weight of these decisions, right?
Right.
You're not just dealing with abstract concepts or theoretical debates. You're dealing with real-world consequences that impact people's lives.
Absolutely. And this case really highlights the need for a nuanced understanding of housing policy and the legal frameworks that govern development. It's not as simple as just saying yes or no to a project.
Let's go back to Councilmember Schaefer for a moment. That take up arms comment was particularly jarring. What are your thoughts on that, especially considering the current political climate?
It's certainly a concerning statement and one that raises questions about his judgment and temperament. while he later claimed to be misquoted. The video evidence is pretty damning. And even if we were to give him the benefit of the doubt and assume it was just a poorly chosen phrase in the heat of the moment, it still speaks to a level of recklessness that's unsettling, particularly coming from an elected official.
Yeah, it feels like we're seeing this trend toward more inflammatory rhetoric in politics, even at the local level. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I think there's definitely a heightened level of tension and polarization in our political discourse. I think social media has played a role in that, creating echo chambers where people are only exposed to information that reinforces their existing beliefs.
And it seems like that can make it harder to have these productive conversations and find common ground, which is essential for effective governance.
Exactly. And I think this situation in Encinitas really highlights the importance of thoughtful and informed leadership. Makes you wonder if maybe they focus too much on the fighting part and not enough on the governing part during their campaign.
Speaking of leadership, the articles mentioned that Councilmember O'Hara spent a lot of time criticizing the previous council during the meeting. It seemed like he was more focused on pointing fingers than finding solutions. What do you make of that approach?
Well, it's a common tactic in politics.
Yeah.
But it's rarely productive. It's easy to criticize from the sidelines. But governing is about more than just finding fault with your predecessors. It's about taking responsibility, working collaboratively, and finding ways to move forward.
It seems like that kind of negativity can create this toxic environment that makes it really difficult to actually address the complex issues at hand.
Exactly. And in this case, where you have a council grappling with such a high-stakes issue like builder's remedy, it's crucial that they work together to find solutions that benefit the entire community. Are there other examples of concerning behavior?
Yeah, for
And as council members?
Councilman O'Hara,
Okay.
he's been called out for berating staff during meetings.
Real.
Several articles detail instances where he's made accusations without providing evidence, creating kind of a tense and unproductive atmosphere. And then there's the whole District 4 appointment thing with Councilman San Antonio.
Oh, yeah, that was a weird one.
It is because the mayor lays out all this criteria.
He's like, this is what we're looking for in a candidate.
Right. Experience, nonpartisanship. And then he ends up appointing Councilman Schaefer's nominee.
Yeah.
Who doesn't even meet the basic requirements.
I'm also curious to hear your thoughts on another detail that emerged from these articles. Councilman Schaefer made a comment that some found to be ageist.
Oh, yeah.
During one of the council meetings.
Right.
He made kind of a dismissive remark about another person's age, even comparing it to his mother's age in a derogatory way.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
That's concerning.
Yeah.
It suggests a lack of sensitivity and awareness, especially for someone in his position.
It does.
How do you think this reflects on the council as a whole?
It certainly doesn't help their image.
Yeah.
It contributes to this perception that this council might be lacking in professionalism and decorum.
It makes you wonder if these council members are truly prepared for the responsibilities of their positions. What I find particularly interesting is how their internal disagreements are spilling out into public view.
Right.
It paints a picture of a council that's struggling to work together.
Yeah, you see that in the articles.
Yeah.
This real lack of cohesion among the council members.
Yeah.
You have Schaefer making inflammatory statements. O'Hara berating staff.
Right.
And others admitting they don't really have a firm grasp on key issues.
Yeah.
It's not a recipe for success.
It's like they're all trying to row the boat in a different direction. And as a result, they're not getting very far.
That's a good analogy.
Right. So what does this mean for the residents of Encinitas?
Well,
they voted for these council members based on their campaign promises.
Yeah.
Now they're seeing a different side of things.
Yeah.
What are they saying about all of this?
Well, one resident was quoted in an article saying, we elected you to deny projects like this. Now do it.
So they're feeling let down.
They're feeling let down, like the council isn't living up to their promises.
They're seeing a disconnect between the rhetoric and the reality.
Yeah, and this disconnect is creating tension.
Okay.
On one side, you have the residents who are frustrated with the council's decisions.
Right.
Particularly with Quail Meadows.
Yeah.
They feel like their voices aren't being heard.
Right.
On the other side, you have the council members themselves who are grappling with, the complexities of governing and the limitations of their power.
It sounds like a recipe for conflict. And it underscores the need for engaged and informed citizens who are willing to hold their elected officials accountable and demand a higher standard of leadership.
So we've talked a lot about the council members and their actions, But I want to bring this back to you, the listener. Why should you care about what's happening in Encinitas?
We're talking about the challenges of balancing local control with state mandates, the complexities of housing policy, the importance of informed voting, and the potential consequences of inexperienced or ineffective leadership.
Yeah, it's a reminder that these issues aren't just abstract concepts or academic debates. They have real-world impacts on people's lives, whether you're dealing with development pressures in your own community or simply trying to make sense of the political landscape.
And it underscores the need for engaged and informed citizens who are willing to hold their elected officials accountable and demand a higher standard of leadership.
But like figuring out what's reliable and what's not can be a real challenge. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose,
Yeah.
but also trying to filter out the impurities at the same time.
Yeah, it's a constant process of discernment, especially in this age of social media, where information spreads so quickly and can be so easily manipulated. It's why critical thinking is more important now than ever.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about absorbing information, but it's about questioning it, evaluating it, and considering different perspectives.
We saw how quickly rhetoric can escalate, how easily misinformation can spread, and how important it is for leaders to really model thoughtful and responsible communication.
Schaefer's Take Up Arms comment is a stark reminder of that. Words have power, and they can have real-world consequences.
For sure. Well, for me, it really reinforces the idea that local politics matter. What happens in our city councils, our school boards, community meetings, has a direct impact on our lives. It's where the rubber meets the road. It's where policies are implemented. And it's where we can make our voices heard most effectively.
Yeah, it's easy to get so caught up in national politics. But the decisions made at the local level often have this much more immediate and tangible effect on our day-to-day lives.
Exactly. And it's also a reminder that we as citizens have a responsibility to stay informed, to engage in thoughtful dialogue, and to hold our elected officials accountable. We can't just sit back and complain. We need to actively participate in shaping the future of our communities.
So to kind of wrap things up, what are some key things that you hope our listeners take away from this deep dive?
Well, I hope they come away with a deeper understanding of the complexities of local governance, the importance of informed voting, and the need for civil discourse in addressing these challenging issues. And most importantly, I hope they feel empowered to engage in their own communities, to ask questions, to make their voices heard, and to contribute to positive change.
I think that's beautifully said. It's been a really fascinating and thought-provoking conversation. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of local politics and the power of informed engagement. We encourage you to continue exploring these issues, to stay curious, and to never underestimate the impact you can have in shaping the world around you. Until next time, keep diving deep.